I went down to a coffee shop and grabbed eggs or whatever. And I came back and I parked in my driveway and I was drenched in sweat. I was shaking and I white knuckled my way through the whole trip. And it was only, I think it was like a mile and a half drive. And I thought to myself, I can't do this again. Like that's the last time. I'm unable now to go get food for myself. Like I can't care for myself anymore. And I just broke down crying in my driveway. Things looked flat, like they didn't have any depth or texture or anything to them. They just looked like they were drawings on paper. The people I knew I should have cared the most about felt like they'd become dangerous to me. Not like I was afraid of them, but they were like dangerous to my survival. And I didn't feel a connection to them anymore. I may not have needed to reach out to you, Sean, had I not used ChatGPT. That's how much worse it made it. It's the worst thing in the world for an anxious person.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Ryan Bellegrave, 36 years old, from Southern California, USA. Ryan struggled with intermittent depersonalization derealization disorder for over 30 years, and his most recent bout lasted for 5 months. His symptoms included feeling out of touch with reality, almost as if he were dead or not fully here, a painful loss of emotional connection to loved ones and even pets, ever-present anxiety, and the unsettling sense that everything appeared fake or two-dimensional. Despite this long and difficult history with DPDR, Ryan never gave up. That latest bout marked a turning point, and he was finally able to break the cycle and fully recover. After he did, Ryan wrote a Reddit post with his very honest advice for DPDR sufferers, which blew up on the subreddit and became a big point of discussion on the forum. And today, Ryan is here to share more of that advice, what decades of on and off DPDR taught him, the tools that helped him finally move past it, and what life feels like now that he's on the other side. Ryan, you're very welcome to the channel. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I appreciate it, man.
Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I mean, you nailed a lot of it in the intro, but yeah, 36 years old, living out in Southern California, very active. I work in sales. I play music. That's a big thing that we spoke about in our one-on-one conversation we had. Married. I have a cat. Just doing normal life stuff.
Nice. What do you work at, Ryan?
So I work in digital sales. I sell websites and like web services, SEO and all that kind of stuff to people in the financial world, like CPAs.
And what kind of music do you play?
I play rock and roll, Sean.
Me too. Good to hear it. Ryan, can you tell us a bit about your experience with DPDR and how did it start for you?
Yeah, so it's long, but I can kind of simmer it down. Basically, when I was 4 or 5, I don't really remember, but I was very young. I witnessed something sort of traumatic happen with my dad. He had a undiagnosed case of spinal meningitis, and I watched him collapse and vomit, and just very, very frightening because nobody knew what was happening. And so long story short, that started me on I guess a path of having kind of intermittent panic attacks where I would feel not fully present in my body, almost as if I was daydreaming, but I couldn't shake it. And I never had a name for it. And the feeling, scared the hell out of me. So got diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And this is in the early 90s. So DPDR wasn't like really, I mean, it was a thing, but no, it didn't really have a name yet. And so I was just put on different medications and I went to different talk therapists and all this kind of stuff. And really the only thing that fixed it was, it seemed like then was time. I got taken with skateboarding and playing music. And so my attention was diverted. Again, didn't know that at the time, but I had better things to do than to worry about panicking. So I was fine for about 10 years. When I was 16, I went through a really bad breakup. I got into a really bad, honestly, probably the worst spell of DPDR that I've had in my entire life, where I couldn't leave my bed for, I want to say it was like 4.5 months. I had a friend come stay with me. My family was convinced that I was suicidal, and I was at points, but it was really bad. And then I remember one day thinking about it, laying in bed and thinking, I really just want to go eat dinner with my family today. Like, I don't want to do this right now. And so I went downstairs. It felt like I was, tightrope walking over a canyon or something with how scared I felt. But I stayed down there. I did it. And then slowly things just started feeling doable. Like little things became more accessible and easier to do. And then eventually it just same thing. It stopped over time. It just got weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And finally it was just gone. This most recent time, I was spray painting a guitar, and I was dealing with other things as well in my life that had changed, like big life changes. So I think that had kind of filled up the jug, so to speak, of stress. And then the guitar spray paint fumes, whatever it was, pushed me over. And I remember the minute it started. I knew what it was this time because again, my whole life through I've had these intermittent episodes, but I remember the moment it started. I was looking in my mirror in my bathroom and everything felt too real, but not within reach. And that's hard to describe with this stuff, but like I could see it, but I couldn't be part of it. Um, and I had a panic attack, first one in a long time. And I worked my way through it, breathed through it, and then I went downstairs and I told my wife, I said, I'm stuck in like a dissociative state. I can't get out of it. And she didn't know what I was talking about. She knew, but she didn't really understand the severity of it. And I was like, I'm gonna go through something now that I need you to understand. This is gonna become like a big thing for me. It's not just like oh, you'll snap out of it, or oh, it'll go away. I'm going on a journey that I don't want to go on. And I did, man. I went bad. I started practicing avoidant behaviors. Last time we talked, I was where I had to wear gloves all the time. I didn't want to feel my hands. I didn't want to feel my arms. I didn't want to be exposed at all. Because everything just felt too real and dangerous.
When we go through it first, especially when you don't know what it is, it's particularly terrifying. But it is also quite a common thing for people to experience it when they're younger and move away from it just through trial and error. Often just because when we're younger, our attention spans aren't that developed and we can just get distracted by skateboarding or a movie or, I have to go to a party to meet my buddies tonight, there's a girl I want to talk to, you just kind of get dragged out of this way of thinking into this way of thinking. Anxiety thrives on your attention. It requires your attention to exist. When we're younger, we tend to be able to pull that attention away more quickly. But as we get older and our awareness of our internal processes becomes more refined, we can see that happening. We can see that moment of the feeling of disconnection as you described, Ryan, and then panic that it might signal that something terrible is happening. And until you have an explanation for it, it really kind of becomes this thing that could just keep hitting you at any time because you don't have an explanation. I mean, this is just random, it could just pop up in 6 months' time. I don't quite know what I know I feel anxious when it happens, but I don't quite know what triggers it. So I'm at the mercy of this thing until the next time it happens. It can just keep happening. So, and in that time, and so you said you had spoken to some like doctors or therapists and over the years as well, Ryan. What was that like? Did you come across the description of depersonalization? Did you get an explanation that made sense to you?
So I want to say this, the doctors were never wrong, but they were never specific. What they always told me I had was just bad anxiety. And like you said in countless videos and to me one-on-one, this is still just anxiety. It's just a really, really exaggerated version of it. So they're not wrong, but the specific set of symptoms where you feel like you're out of touch and out of sync with reality is when you're first going through it, it's almost impossible to believe that that's just anxiety. It doesn't feel like anxiety. Anxiety is sweaty palms, fast heart rate, heavy breathing. That's the anxious feeling that I know. But then all of a sudden, I feel like I'm in limbo or purgatory or I'm in the matrix. That it doesn't track the same. Uh, I actually found out what DPDR was, and we talked about this in our one-on-one too, from Harris Harrington on YouTube about 10 years ago. He had I can never remember the name of the course, but it was a really long title of the reintegration something or other. But I watched the whole thing, and the stuff that he was claiming was causing it, I didn't agree with entirely, but the exercises and the solutions he offered worked. So as I did them more and more and more, I started feeling more confident. And as you've probably seen in the past, it snowballs. Like once you get one win under your belt, the next one gets easier, and then so on and so forth. And they eventually just start stacking up until one day it's just like, oh, I guess it's over.
So you were just you were just Googling the symptoms, Ryan, and you came across the description and you were like, that's it, that's the thing, is this?
Correct. Yeah. I was on, so 10 years ago when I found him, I was withdrawing from Ativan, the benzodiazepine, and I had a bad reaction to it. I don't know what happened exactly, but it threw me into a bad episode of BPDR. And I don't remember what I was looking. I think it was on a forum for Ativan or benzodiazepine withdrawal, and someone had mentioned DPDR as a secondary effect of withdrawal. And I was like, okay, I've never heard of that. When I first found it, way, way, way back when, it was called defamiliarization, and it was a very like kind of a gaseous, vague explanation of what it was. It's like, oh, you feel like you're behind a pane of glass or whatever. But when I looked up DPDR, the first thing that popped up was his channel.
Wow. Defamiliarization. Um, Interesting. I may have come across that term back in the day, but I guess then that would have been superseded by depersonalization and derealization. Is this so interesting as well that like this the awareness of this condition has changed so completely since you and me were young, like, as in back in the day when I was searching for this in like the early to mid to or the mid 2000s, like there was nothing, it took me a long, long time. Whereas now, even the Google algorithm itself has changed so that when you type the symptoms into Google, it'll be just like, oh, this is the thing you're looking for.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the day, you would have been. I mean, it took me a long, long time, and I went through every possibility of what this was as well. I mean, I thought I had everything under the sun, and I was going to different doctors who, and as you well said as well, Ryan, it's not that they were wrong, because I was getting the, oh, it's anxiety explanation as well, and in my head I was thinking like, but this isn't like I mean, I know what I've felt anxiety before. I mean, but this is different. Anxiety doesn't make me feel like I'm not real, or that I've lost touch with reality around me. That can't be anxiety. That has to be something more serious. So even the explanations that I was getting, I wasn't happy with. So there's always this kind of undercurrent of like, there's something else. There has to be something else. So across this time period, then, Ryan, were you just kind of going about your life? I mean, I know you mentioned that you had times where you were bedbound, but in general, across that time, were you just kind of pushing through the anxiety that you felt and going about your life and getting your career on track and such?
Uh, yeah. I think what I actually had as a kid, I found out way later was, I guess, panic disorder, to where the panic attacks became the focal point of my fear. And it wasn't the things that was causing them; it was the panic attacks themselves. And when trying to think of the order that things happened. So about let's call it 18 years old. At about 18 years old, I had more or less decided that I was going to just live around them and do my best to just kind of, live a normal life as much as I could. But there were a lot of limiting factors. Like when I traveled too far, I would get anxious. Once my anxiety hit a certain threshold, I would panic. I would want to, freak out and run away, try to run home, whatever. So I just didn't travel. Um, Airplane travel was really difficult, if not impossible. But beyond those like limiting factors that were kind of agreed upon mentally with myself, it was my life was pretty normal.
Okay, okay. Something you mentioned as well, I found really interesting, Ryan, was when you said, I really just wanted to go eat dinner with my family. Um, and this was something that I had as well, where I got to a point where I had gone through the ringer with this thing and I had been terrorized by it. I couldn't, I felt like I couldn't function anymore. I couldn't do anything. And I had also become obsessed with researching it and trying to find answers. And not just answers, but the answer. Like, so even if I find out what this is, now I need to find out how to fix it. So I have to find the power button, and it's out there somewhere. It's in some
Yeah.
forum, it's in some combination of advice or medications or something. When I find that, it'll switch it off. So I became obsessed with that. And eventually I got to a point where that just became my life. And after that, I got to a point where I remember saying to myself, like, I wouldn't mind doing something else, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind reading Lord of the Rings. I wouldn't mind going to watch a movie. I love movie. I'm a big movie guy. I work in film. I wouldn't mind watching a movie instead of thinking about the nature of reality and consciousness again. Like, you know, and
Yeah.
weirdly, when you kind of think of it like that, it disempowers it, and it feels so strange because that thought feels terrifying. It's the size of the universe, it's the nature of reality and consciousness. But you just kind of go, okay, but like. But I'd like to watch Jurassic Park. I mean, that's got dinosaurs in it, you know, and it,
Yeah.
and it just kind of gives your brain the space to just be a bit lighter with it, just loosen the grip on it a little bit, and counterintuitively that gives you the space to move away from it. So that kind of resonated with me when you said just the thing about I wouldn't mind having dinner with my family, you know.
Well, and it's man, there's a handful of those situations that are almost painful to remember, and I'm thankful that I can't feel how I felt in those moments. I guess your brain just doesn't allow it. But I remember this most recent time, the last time I went out to get breakfast, and I went down to a coffee shop and grabbed eggs or whatever. And I came back and I parked in my driveway, and I was when I tell you I was drenched in sweat, Sean, like I was more water than I was man at that point. I was drenched in sweat. I was shaking, and I white knuckled my way through the whole trip. And it was only I think it was like a mile and a half drive. And I thought to myself, I can't do this again. Like that's the last time. I'm unable now to go get food for myself. Like I can't care for myself anymore. And I just broke down crying in my driveway. I cried for like half an hour.
That's so tough. It is the kind of realization of the loss of independence that is particularly brutal. It's particularly brutal. Um, for me, I had moments like that where I realized that I couldn't drive my car anymore. Um, I was so terrified that I was going to lose control of it, or I would lose consciousness. The anxiety would get so bad that I would just like my hands would fly off the wheel and I would crash into a crowd of people or I'd kill somebody. And
Right.
this visual thing, I kept having this thought over and over. So then I just thought, well, the safest thing for me to do is not drive my car. And then the realization of that hits you. I'm in my mid-20s. I'm living in the south of Ireland. The transport infrastructure is not good. So and now I can't go anywhere. So I can't go to concerts. I can't go to the theater. Can't go meet my friends. I can't do anything really. That's very, very hard to take because because it's such a fundamental aspect of being an adult, you know. And I've got an income coming in. I can go out and buy food. I can cook food, and then it's just like, no, you can't. No, you can't. You can't. No, you can't. All that stuff, you can't do that anymore. Here's the list of things you
Yeah.
could do. They're all crossed off now. Welcome to your new life where you can't even go out and get food. It's brutal. It feels brutal. especially until you get the explanation for what it is and also how common it is. But it is tough. It's very, very tough when you're going through it.
Yeah, and to kind of cap onto that too, the realization when I spoke with you, and I'd seen kind of flickers of this in other forums like Reddit, but I had seen people mention that it is better to think of it more as a trick than to think of it as a disorder. It's a thing that it's a mind trick that your brain is playing on you, basically.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. It's a trick rather than a
And
disorder. Yeah, yeah. Because I think we may have spoken about this before on our call, Ryan, but the idea of a disorder, the word disorder sounds terrifying especially when you kind of, okay, I've been diagnosed with depersonalization disorder. It's like, what? That sounds awful, and it is
yeah,
when you're going through it first, right? But also, it's important to remember that the word disorder is just used in the categorical sense, especially in this context and the example I always like to give is if you have 3 panic attacks over the course of a month, you're having panic attacks. If you have 30 panic attacks over the course of a month, you have panic disorder. But at no point is it anything other than panic attacks. It's still just panic attacks.
right.
It's just about the frequency and the severity of it. It basically just means that it's lasting longer than it should do. But when you come across that first, it's like, this is a disorder. So there's something damaged in my brain, and now I'm disordered. So I'm out of order,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like a lift, like an elevator, Oh, I'm out of order. But a trick is a much better way to think about it. It's just that your brain just goes, okay, there's too much going on here, so we're going to put up this little airbag until we get out of it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good healthy way of thinking about it. Ryan, you've mentioned a few of them. Um, would you mind just getting into a bit more detail about the symptoms that you experience across all this time?
Oh boy. Yeah. So I guess the most frequent one was maybe not even directly tied to DPDR, but it was the fear of having a panic attack that I was obsessed with doing anything I possibly could to try and, if they happen, how do I mitigate them quickly? How do I prevent them? What, like you were saying, what combination of echinacea, magnesium glycinate, and vitamin do I need to take to how much sleep? Like it was just everything became very strictly regimented, 100% around not feeling those feelings. The feelings that would persist though, the DPDR stuff would be this time around, it was very visual. Usually it's not, it's more of an internal thing, but things looked flat, like they didn't have any depth or texture or anything to them. They just looked like they were drawings on paper. Um, the people I knew I should have cared the most about felt like they were they'd become dangerous to me. Not like I was afraid of them, but they were like dangerous to my survival. And I didn't feel a connection to them anymore. Like my wife, I knew her cognitively, I knew who she was and our relationship, and I remembered our past. But the spark that you feel between a person that you love was absent. It wasn't there. Um, and I felt that with my cat, which was horrifying. And I think he picked up on it because he'd get weird around me. He would stay, he'd kind of stare in sit at the corner of the room and stare at me like, you know. Um, the tactile anxiety was really bad. Like I mentioned, having to wear gloves. I began to kind of have, I guess you could call it OCD traits. I wouldn't say it would have been diagnosable, but I had compulsions that I had to abide by. Otherwise, I would panic. Um, and anything touching me that I didn't, it's hard to describe. Doesn't even make sense now, but anything that was gripping too loosely on me would bug me unless it was tight. If it was tight, it was okay. And describing it out loud, it sounds absolutely nonsensical, but those were the rules. And then agoraphobia. It caused bad agoraphobia this time around too. I would stand at the threshold of my bedroom and I would just try to psych myself up to go down and get a bottle of water or to get food. I would have to like get myself excited and in the moment and present. And I didn't always. I went, geez, man, the first probably 5 weeks I skip meals left and right. I lost like 20 pounds in the first month.
The weight loss thing is particularly frightening, because you're seeing
Yeah.
this physical representation of what you think is happening to you mentally. Uh, yeah, it's and and again, feels bizarre. Feels like your world's being upended. But what happens when you're in fight or flight response? Your body reduces your appetite. It reduces your sleep. Sleep disruption, appetite disruption. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
two more quick things I want to mention. Two more bullet points. The big fear for me too. The one I noticed, the one that I knew I was back in DPDR, spectrophobia, the fear of mirrors, the fear of looking at myself. Um, and you hear this a lot in DPDR, and I think what it is this is like a total harebrained armchair psychology theory. So, pay it no attention. But what I literally think it is your brain remembers you. Trying to think of a way to shortcut this without making it too long. In my opinion, I think that DPDR stems from earlier in life. There's some type of unresolved issue. And I think that you kind of have like a mental checkpoint, and your brain catalogs that as being the current moment because your brain doesn't have any reference of time. It's just keep you alive. This is safe. This is dangerous. That's kind of how I guess the amygdala and the fear response work. But when you see yourself as you currently are, your brain says, that is not how I remember myself looking from this reference point of where this trauma occurred. I think that's what it is. Because there was times when I would look in the mirror and think, I'm too old right now. And it was the most insane thought, but I remember thinking it a couple times, a handful of times.
interesting. Yeah, there's also
Yeah.
this idea of like state specific memory, which is that you can't. It's very difficult to imagine or to kind of conjure an emotional psychological state when you're not in it. So it's when you're feeling
Yeah.
depressed, it's very difficult to imagine being happy. When you're happy, it's very difficult to imagine being depressed. Same with anxiety. Like, I can talk about anxiety all day and I can remember what it was like when I went through it, but I can't relate to it anymore. And the reason I can't
Yeah.
relate to it is because my brain is not in the fight or flight state anymore. So it's almost like you don't have access to that emotional vernacular. It's like a different language.
Yeah.
It's like two different branches of maths, and one can't quite describe the other. It can attempt it, but it can't get there because the language is different. The tools are different. Um, and I think and a big part of the what's the fear of mirrors? Is there a name for it, Ryan?
Spectrophobia.
Spectrophobia. Wow. I've never heard that before. That's geez, every day is a school day. That's really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
I think as well with the because just of the nature of DP and Dior, the intense sense of disconnection that you have, it is. I mean, it's surreal enough when you're in your in your childhood home, and the place doesn't feel real. And then I think when you look in a mirror, it feels so acute, and the sense of disconnection is difficult enough when you're speaking to your parents or your friends, but when you see yourself as well, it's just terrifying. It is terrifying. The thing you mentioned as well, Ryan, about the spark between you and the people you love, and this was a big thing for me as well, was you're speaking to your friends or your parents or your siblings, and you know who they are, and like I know this person is, but I don't feel the connection that I had, and it almost feels like something's been unplugged. And how do I
Yeah.
get that? And it's so weird, and it's like how do I get that back? And again, what I found I was looking for in recovery was that I need to plug that back in, and I know it'll be
Yeah.
like the current will start moving again. And what I realized was that the sense of connection that I had with my parents, for example, it was never actually broken. It's just that it's hard to focus on it or to allow it to flow naturally when you're constantly checking to see is it still there. So, um, when I recovered, I remember speaking to my parents and just chatting with them, and afterwards I thought to myself, like, you know, it's not like I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh, you're definitely my mother. Like, oh, you're 100% my dad. Like, yeah, oh, you're absolutely my parents. Like, of course not. You're talking about the weather. You're talking about like, what the next holiday might be next. You're shooting the breeze. The whole connection thing happens in the background while you're just going about your daily life. It's, you very rarely interrupt what your thought process to say, oh, I feel really connected to you. Like, but if we keep asking that question, we interrupt the normal flow state that allows that emergent property to be there. Um, it's so simple, but when you're going through it, it feels like it's a million miles away. It feels like it's
Yeah.
this is why you feel like you're in a different dimension. I feel like I'm completely cut off from these people, and the reason it's happening is so simple. Um, it's annoyingly simple, but and as you said, it's just a trick. It's just your brain. It's just your brain saying, "Are you sure you're not in danger?" I know this. I know you're trying to chat to your folks, but are you sure you're not in danger? And
Yeah.
then you catastrophically interpreting that as, oh, maybe I'm in danger, maybe I'm in a different reality, maybe I'm in the Matrix. Yeah, it's wild. The whole experience is so wild, so simple, so wild.
And you know what? I like your the because you've mentioned this in a couple different videos that I've watched of yours, where you mentioned I just want to be able to turn that switch back off or turn it back on. There's a guy I watch. His name is Josh Fletcher, and he's a psychotherapist in England somewhere, Manchester, I think. Um, the way he describes it is when your stress jug overflows, that's when you end up in these disordered states. I like to think of, rather than flipping a switch or plugging something back in, you're trying to sort of like contain a flood. It's not something going back on, it's something going back in. You got all this water and debris and everything, and now you got to go around and kind of sweep and let everything dry out. It's more of that type of process versus just an instantaneous fix, at least in my experience.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really that's a really gorgeous way of putting it. And I think that looking for the power switch as well, it just trips us up because then we're expecting a moment where we can switch the anxiety off immediately. As I said,
Right.
there's some combination of puzzles here that when I click into place, it'll go, oh, it's gone. But that can't happen. It's not going to happen because you're changing a habit. So now you can get rid of it. Like, of course you can get rid of this, but it's a process. You're training yourself out of one habit and into another. So when you're expecting to find the power switch, even that expectation, you're tripping yourself up. like what I did, Ryan, and I wonder, did you have an experience like this as well? But like, I would I would find some piece of advice on the internet, um, and I would try it, and I would wake up the next morning and go, "Did it work?" And I did that every day, over and over. To wake up next morning, did it work? And then it didn't work, so I was back to the drawing board. And then I got to the point where I realized that the reason it was persisting was because I was waking up every morning going, "Did it work?"
Right.
Checking. It's the
Yep.
it's yeah. It's the check. It's the check as opposed to just get up, just start your day. Don't lie in bed going, "Is the CPR still there?" Like, just get out of bed, take a cold shower, take the dog for a walk, run, start your day, go. It's it
Yeah.
feels counterintuitive, but that's it. It's the checking to see, is there a power button that keeps it going. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I watched the recovery videos and I hear these anecdotal stories, it's always been something I've wanted to say to people. And it's literally like when people are looking for the ABC, this is what I got to do to get out of it. It is literally what you just said. Get up, take a shower. Like, you're gonna feel screwed up. You're gonna feel weird. Like that's it. You're gonna feel that way for a while, but it doesn't last forever.
No, no. A piece of advice I always like to give people is, and I wish I'd been able to give myself this advice back in the day, but like, when you wake up in the morning and anxiety and DP and DR are there, let them be there. Get out of bed and start your day. Don't beat
Right.
yourself up about it. Don't get frustrated. Absolutely do not lie in bed and think, "Oh, how am I going to get through today?" Just let them be there. Get out of bed, start your day. And then when you get to the point during recovery, which will happen very soon, you get to the point where you wake up in the morning and anxiety and DPDR are not there. Let them not be there. Get out of bed and start your day. Don't pat yourself on the
Yes,
back. Don't celebrate it. Don't go around shouting at the rooftop, shouting from the rooftops. Let them not be there. Go about your day, and everywhere in between, just get out of bed and go about your day. And what you're doing is and again,
exactly.
it sounds incredibly simplistic, but it's based in cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's demonstrating to your brain that this doesn't make a difference to you. It makes no difference to my day whether this is there or not. And when you show your brain that over and over, then your brain says, well, if it's making no difference to our day, and the house isn't on fire, and there's no bear chasing us, and we're not being shot at, why is this alarm system on at all? We'll just switch it off. But again, it happens in the background. You forget about it in the background while you're doing other things, which is what you described had happened to you over the years as well, Ryan. Uh, what was your lowest point in the whole experience, Ryan? Is there any particular time or moment that sticks with you?
Yeah, there's a handful of them, but the lowest I remember, I had, yeah, it's kind of an elongated one, but yeah, there was a span in between, I guess this started for me in the beginning of June, and it persisted. I would say the break point where I would say, I think it's over now, would have been like 3/4 of the way through October, so fairly recently. But there was a point probably right in the beginning of August where I had a friend basically force herself over to my house because nobody had heard from me in like over a month except for my immediate circle. Um, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna come over. I'll bring you food." And I said, "Okay." So she came over, and at that moment, I had the spins all the time too. I had really, really bad like this does something to your sense of balance. I don't know what it is, but I had to be laying sideways, and I had to be gripping onto something like something solid that wouldn't move, like a dresser or something like that. And I was laying in my office on the couch, and I was holding onto a chair, and I just had my eyes closed, and I looked at her, and she was tearing up. She was like clearly distraught, and I registered it, but I didn't care because in that moment the only thing that mattered was hold on to the chair. And so while she was coming over, she came over a couple more times, and during one of those times, she suggested calling a telehealth doctor. So I said, okay. Called one. The doctor, bless his heart, he told me about a drug called hydroxyzine, which is also called Atarax. It's basically just a antihistamine. It's an old one. So he's like, try that, see if that works. So I got them that same day. I took one, and I went from anxiety at level like 9.5 down to like 6. And that felt like just peace. I felt like I could have fallen asleep right then and there. And so I started taking them just to feel, they told me to take them as needed, not to regiment them. But I started taking them every 3 hours, just like clockwork. And I remember the first time I hit 100 milligrams, there were 25 milligram doses. So that I remember that first time I hit that threshold, and I was laying in bed and I have a clock over here, and I was staring at the clock, and I was just literally watching the second hands tick by and thinking, this is better than what it was. Like I would rather just sit here doped out on antihistamines and watch the clock go by than deal with anything I just dealt with. And at that point, I'm like, this isn't a life. You're literally just staring at the clock, waiting for time to go by. You're just literally counting down the days. So why even bother? And there were fleeting moments of, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be alive anymore. There's no point. This isn't going to go away like it did before. I'm screwing up my friendships, screwing up my relationships, screwing up my job. I'm burning through my savings by just being here and not earning money, and just everything. The weight of the entire world of being an adult human being was just cascading on me. And I was like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. But I kept doing it. So
Yeah, yeah. It's again, as we were saying earlier, the loss of independence and of agency. It's a loss of agency in the world of you can't do anything That's very very hard, right? And then seeing your friends, seeing how your friends see you as well, and the reality of that hitting you, it's yeah, that's very difficult.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. But I guess then on a brighter note, Ryan, so how did your recovery start? What were the first steps in that?
Well, I had a conversation with you that went a long way. You, you, the funny thing about you, Sean, is that you tell people stuff they probably already know, but the way you deliver the information is very. I felt when we started talking within 5 minutes, I felt like I'd known you for years. You have a very like disarming aura, for lack of a better word. And so when you're telling me this stuff, I could finally shut myself down and just listen. I could receive versus just, shutting down and no, 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 no. And you were telling the information that I read in different places and, different forums, YouTube videos or whatever. But when you made it personalized, when I told you my situation and you gave me a response based on my story, it was like, I have to trust him. Like that is the next step. You have to trust one of these things. You've seen this a million times over. There has to be an element of truth to it. Even if 99% of it's wrong, 1% is right. Just go for that 1%. So I started taking the gloves off first, because I hated the gloves, man. They pissed me off. They were making my hands all dry and it was terrible. But took the gloves off, 5 minutes, put them back on, 10 minutes, put them back on. I'm going to go ride my exercise bike in the garage, half an hour. I'm going to take the gloves off for half of it. And that just kept building and building and building and building. And one night I was laying in bed, or I guess I fell asleep, and then I woke up, and in my sleep, I had taken them off. Like my brain was just so done with it. It waited till I was unconscious to be like, you're done with this. And then I went a full day, and then it was 2 full days. And then it was, now I haven't worn them in a week. So when I started seeing that thing was enough. It was, I've gone downstairs to ride the bike. I can do that now. I know that now. I've driven my car on the block a couple times. I know I can do that now. I want to go get my own food. I'm going to go get lunch. Drove a mile away, drove 2 miles away. Yesterday, I drove 5 miles onto the freeway for the first time. So it's just like, you're gonna feel scared. Like that's the whole point. You're gonna feel horrified. The feeling doesn't stop. It doesn't go away just because you decide you're going to change things. It's still there. You just have to tolerate it a little bit. And when I think back on, I don't know, I couldn't even tell you what I thought was going to happen because I've had panic attacks a bunch of times in my life, and they've always been the same thing. It's like 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes less, of like fear and utter terror, and then it ends, and then you shake or you cry, and then it's over. So all this stuff that I'm doing to try and avoid it I have my ice bottle and my ice packs downstairs and my breathing and my CBD and all this stuff. None of that was ever going to save me. Like there was nothing I could have done. If a panic attack hit me, all the CBD in the world wouldn't have stopped it. It would have just burned through me because that's what they always do. So having that realization of, I guess, sort of like I guess it's sort of a fatalist way of looking at it, but it's like, just do the damn thing, then just hit me with your best shot. I have stuff I want to go do. And by thinking that and applying it to different things got easier. And it snowballs. Like I said earlier, you get one, and then you get two, and then you get four, and then you get 10, and it snowballs on itself.
Such a good way of describing it. It snowballs.
Yeah.
It goes in the opposite direction. So that feedback loop that happened in the first place with this, between anxiety and the DPDR, which is a symptom of anxiety, that feedback loop starts to slow down, and then it starts going in the opposite direction. It just starts unraveling, and you start to see the proof of it around you that felt impossible. But then you're just like, well, I'm in my car again, And as we were saying earlier, for me, it was like, well, I can either never drive my car again, or if we need to get a loaf of bread, I can hop in the car, drive 5 minutes down the road, walk into the store, get the bread, and then drive home. I'm probably not going to die in a fireball, but I have to show my brain that. and just do it. Come back, and I might be shaking and I might be sweating, but I did it. Um, but I'm so glad that that you found the Zoom or the coaching session helpful, Ryan. But but it's the work you put into it afterwards. This is the thing. Like
Yeah.
you have to do it. Um, uh, you only see the proof when you push yourself to do the work and see it. Because I mean, and I guess at the core of it is it's exposure therapy. You know, the mistake that we make is that we think, well, in again, getting back to just using the example of me with the car, or you with the car as well, of saying like, well, what I'll do is I can't drive my car at the moment, but I'll wait until the anxiety is gone, and then I'll get into my car and I'll drive down to the shops. You will never get into the car. You will never drive the
No.
car again, right? That day will never come. And you're prolonging it by thinking about it like that because until you do that, you are allowing anxiety to make the decision for you whether you can drive your car or not. And when your brain
Right.
sees you making that decision or giving an anxiety that voice and that vote, it categorizes anxiety as being something that's incredibly important, and that permeates your day. It permeates everything. I can't drive my car, So when you say to yourself, I'm getting the car. I'm just going. I'm just going. I'm going to have dinner with my parents. I'm just doing it. And I might feel scared, I might feel anxious, but then you do it. You don't die. You don't faint. Nothing bad happens. You don't crash the car. You don't collapse on the table. Nothing happens. And then a little box has been ticked in your brain that says, okay, that's a bit of proof in the other direction. Maybe if I did that, I could actually drive over to my friend who lives 10 minutes away and call into them for a cup of tea, okay. And then the snowball starts to go. But it's because you put in the work as well. And I
Yeah.
think, and this is another part of recovery, and this is, and something you talked about in your Reddit post as well, right? Which is something I really want to talk to you about it because I loved it. But you don't sugarcoat it. And I think when people say, "Oh, well, look, anxiety, just recovery from anxiety," it's nice, and you'll get there. Okay, you will, but you have to work. I mean, it's not because you have to. You're training your brain out of one state into another. The key word is training. Training isn't like when you're training at the gym. You don't sit there and wait to go to the gym. You have to go to the gym. You have to do the change. You have to make the changes happen yourself. But good on you for putting in the work to make it happen so fast as well, because I mean you've seen like very, very impressive results in quite a short space of time, because I remember speaking to you, man, and like you were in a bad place, like, and this was what, less than 2 months ago, was it?
Yeah. Probably about, yeah, 6, 7 weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The progress you've made since then is I mean, it's wonderful to see. It's very impressive, but it's because you put in the work. It is, so good on you.
Thank you.
So the Reddit post. So just for the viewers out there, Ryan wrote an article on his Substack, which he also posted to Reddit. And I came across this, and it's in I think the main DPDR forum. And I just want to, if you don't mind, Ryan, I just want to read a couple of excerpts from it because it was so interesting. So it was a Reddit post from somebody like moving quickly through their recovery process, and someone giving a very, very honest take on it. So I just want to read one or two sections. So it's called "Leave Here Immediately." And do not and do not return. You will feel better. You're constantly surrounded by horror stories and other people's symptoms, always wondering if you'll develop them at some point. Most of the posts here are borderline traumatic in their desperation and hopelessness. This is largely not a community in the traditional sense at all, rather it's a shared ongoing trauma pit. If you know it's DPDR, you no longer have a reason to be here, period. This sounds harsh, but at this moment, if you've scanned loads and loads of posts here, you're doing it to yourself. You're prolonging this. You can stop anytime you want. No, it's not immediate. There's no immediate fix. The sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be and the more quickly you'll kick this. DPDR is a trauma and stress response in the vast majority of cases. Why in God's name would you continuously drip feed yourself other people's trauma? Why would you ever expect to get better if you're swimming in terror and misery? Your mind responds to external stimuli. You've got to put this away and let your brain rest. Obsession and fear are the drivers of this loop, period. And one more paragraph. I'm sorry this seems harsh. I'm sorry you're suffering. I'm sorry you feel unreal or dead or locked in a dream. At some point, you have to pick yourself and face facts. This is a state, not a life sentence. It requires work and courage to beat. Reference all the lifers you want. Tell me all about the people stuck for years. I'll tell them what I just told you. You're doing it to you. Stop looking for monsters that aren't there. You've seen everything this can do. It never becomes anything else beyond an anxiety disorder in different masks. So I read this and I was like, this is fantastic. And it's something that I've developed over the years as well. So when I first started doing this, Ryan, this type of work, I was a lot, I guess, more gentle about the communications. You know, I mean, the fact that I'm not a doctor, and I'm just, I'm a guy in Ireland just kind of giving advice. But I would always be quite gentle about it. And over the years, I became a lot more curt with it. And I realized that's what people want. And it's what I would have wanted when it first happened to me. I didn't want someone to put pussyfoot around this. I want someone to tell me what this is, what I need to do, and to cut the fat and just tell me, right? And my God, this article did that. So what prompted you to write it, Ryan? And what was it like seeing the responses to it? Because it kind of took off on the forum.
It did. So to be perfectly blunt, being on that Reddit, I would get, one of the, per my post, one of the first things you have to do with DPDR to get over it is stop looking at stuff that pertains to DPDR. So I got out of there. I stopped checking my messages, stopped looking at my updates, but I would get intermittent notifications from my email. So-and-so just posted to panic. So-and-so just posted to DPR. And I would see the same bylines going through all these posts. And there was people very sloppily disguising reassurance seeking, or asking if other people have this symptom. This one's really weird. Have you been checked for this? Have you been? And it's just, when I see people respond, and I'm going to sound like a little bit of a hypocrite, and I'm aware of that, and I'm sorry, but I have to say this the way I'm going to say it. When you see people respond from a place of authority, but you're still on the damn forum yourself, I mean, patrolling for these posts to be able to respond to make yourself feel bigger or more important or more well-read or whatever. And I know my post comes across like that too. I'm not discounting that. But when you see it become like almost a hobby that people have, and those same people would flip around days late, sometimes hours later, and seek reassurance, or they would ask a question similar to the one they claim to have expertise on. And I'm like, this is a cycle. You are literally living in a cycle right now, and you don't even see it. Like, you are so wrapped up in this that it's become an identity. You've tribalized it. You've made it, you've like befriended your suffering and made it something you feel like you need to protect. And that's bullshit. Like, pardon my language, but like, that's a stupid way to live. And that anger just kept gestating, and I kept seeing the same stuff proliferate over and over and over. And I'm like, I'm just going to vent and put it out there. I'm just going to vomit onto Reddit all this rage that I have and all these feelings I have on this. And I'm going to fight with people in the comments. And it didn't come from a good place. But when I started writing it, I went back and edited it, and I was like, this could actually probably be helpful for people. And so the initial reception wasn't awesome. There was people that would do exactly what I outlined they would do in the article by defending their, and I don't want to call it defending their trauma, because that feels unfair, but by defending this loop they built for themselves, wanting to stay in it, and almost fighting not only me, but fighting the idea of recovery. by making themselves feel like their case is unique, or I've had it for too long. You don't know what this is like. Me and a handful of other people have this very unique brand, and it's called Super DPDR or whatever. They would just find all these excuses to not ever try and just do the hard thing that they know they have to do. Or they'd say they'd done it and it didn't work. I'm like, it's not a do it one time and you're done. It's a continue to do it. And I know you're lying to me because you're on this forum. You felt compelled to respond to me. So it came from rage and then it turned into something different.
And it's a frustration, I think, as well. I mean, it's more of a frustration with for me, because I would have, when I started writing the book or the DP manual way back in the day, it came from a sense of frustration with a lack of awareness about the condition, and that there was so much misinformation swimming out there about it, because all the information is actually there. Like it's understood. It's an anxiety-based condition. There are ways and means to get out of all anxiety-based conditions based on cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. There's actually nothing even vaguely mysterious about it. But when that information isn't as clearly delineated as it is for other anxiety-based conditions, it creates all the space for all this other opinions to come in and start shaping it. And then you have to kind of machete your way through this jungle of like misinformation of like, oh, well, there's actually super DPDR as well. And, I hope you don't have that. And because if you do, you have it for 20 years minimum. So, and just kind of got to get used to it. But I would see posts like that and just, I would lose my mind, like, and thinking, oh, there's a whole menagerie of types of DPDR out there, according to the forums. And
Yeah.
you better hope that you don't have this one, but you won't know you've got this one until it's been X amount of time or whatever. And there's people getting into arguments and such. And also, I mean, I'm not for a moment minimizing some of the experiences that lead to DPDR. People can have all sorts of different conditions and circumstances, but I do think it's important to not overcomplicate the actual condition itself, because it is ultimately a symptom of anxiety. That's what it is, okay? And the example I like to give is, what people say, but like, you don't understand the circumstances that led to mine. I had a very, very difficult thing that happened in my childhood or whatever. And okay, and I'm absolutely not minimizing that for a moment. But the worry that you have a specific set of circumstances that means that you can't get out of, that you can't stop the symptoms of DPDR is like worrying that I have a specific set of circumstances that means that I can never relax my shoulders again, or that I will always suffer from heart palpitations, and that's just the way it is. And it's like, well, no, that's not true, because I mean, not that those aren't contributing factors, but symptoms of anxiety are, they're temporary, and they are happening in the moment, and you do actually have control over them, right? And there are things you can do to mitigate them. You see this yourself. There's days where it feels more intense. There's where it feels less intense. But there's no line that you can cross that you can't come back from with this. And in fact, the worry that there is some imaginary line that you can cross that means you have super DPDR, that's anxiety. That's anxiety. That's anxiety telling you all these other people are recovered, but you can't recover because you've got super duper DPDR. And by the way, and I think I said this to you, Ryan, like, I've worked with tens of thousands of people over the years, and I would say that the one thing that every single person has in common across the board is the fear that their version of DPDR is different and that they
Yep.
can't recover. All these other people recovered, you and me recovered, great. I don't think, because what happened to me is different. Everybody thinks that. Everybody thinks that. I thought that's so. I was convinced of this so deeply. I thought I was going to be in the medical textbooks with Sean O'Connor's DPDR 2.0. I was certain that was going to happen, right? And the thing is that, like, when you're part of recovery is like taking this scaffolding off of it, this narrative scaffolding that says, oh, but I think mine's different, and take it off and just say, no, no, no. Everyone has that worry. It's just anxiety. It's just a symptom of anxiety. That's all. I know it hasn't felt like that at times, but that's what it is. That's all it's ever been. But it is particularly difficult to remove that scaffolding and get to that core understanding of it that allows you to recover when you are constantly looking through posts and catastrophic interpretations for people who are saying, well, you might have a version that's incurable. You might have DPDR 2.0. You can't be sure. I've had it for 10 years. And this is why in cognitive behavior therapy and all the forms of anxiety therapy, it's so, like they say, step away from the forums. You have to. You simply have to, because you're training yourself out of a habit of thought. And also, I certainly do not, like, I don't blame any people in the forums. I was that person for years. I did that for years. But I was on the forums all day, every day, looking at all these different explanations, getting into arguments, pushbacks, etc., and then wondering why that evening I couldn't stop thinking about it, having spent my day
Right.
researching it and arguing about it. And it took me so long to pull the camera back and look at what I was doing and go, like, Sean, the reason you can't stop thinking about it is because you're researching it and discussing it all day.
It seems like after a while, people almost tend to kind of inadvertently turn it into a hobby. It becomes an area of fascination, like morbid fascination. But people, it's weird. It's a weird thing. I did it. It sounds like you did it, but you're just like, well, I want to know every in and out. And like I have the Rhodes Scholar DPDR master's degree. I could write you a master's thesis on all these things, but at the end of the day, like that didn't help me get over it. The thing that helped me get over it was just doing the thing anyways.
Yeah. I think you said really interesting when you said you tribalize it. People tribalize it, which is a natural.
Reddit didn't like that.
Reddit didn't like that.
No.
Oh, when you wrote that as this?
Well, there was a couple of particularly fiery responses, and I said basically that I said I didn't come here to start a fight, which was not entirely true, but I didn't come here to fight specifically with you. But I want to challenge the way you think of things, and people are like, you're arrogant, you're not self-reflective, you don't blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, be that as it may, even if all those things were 100% true, and I'm not saying they are, they aren't, what I'm telling you is that you have turned this thing into like a weird club. And the verbiage, the phraseology people would use would say, not like us, or people like me, or things like that. They are differentiating themselves from everyone else that's going through it. And I'm like, you have to, by now, if you've had it for 40 years, like you're telling me you have to by now acknowledge that, like you said, that is anxiety telling you that thing. That is what makes you feel that way. It's literally the disorder doing that to you, and you're defending it. And that's weird.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's an emergent property of any discussion forum like that these little kind of groups will emerge because people will relate to each other. I certainly did. I came across people who would have the symptoms that I had, and they'd have the same triggers. And then there'd be other people who didn't have the same triggers, or maybe slightly different symptoms or whatever. And I could relate more to the people who had been through what I went through.
Sure.
But then arguments would happen. And the other thing that happened was, and this blew my mind when it happened first, but people would come back to the forum and post, "I've recovered." And sometimes people would say, "I don't know what happened, but like I went on a holiday for 2 weeks. I backpacked around wherever, and I just came, and it was just gone." The weirdest thing. So I'm just coming back to say, okay, it's gone, and it's been gone now for a couple of months. So great. And then people would respond and say, "You probably never had it that bad in the first place."
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
Yes.
you only have the type of DPDR that was triggered by weed. Mine was triggered by a panic attack, a trauma. Like, so you didn't actually have it that bad. I'm going like, Jesus Christ, like the what first of all, you have no idea what this person went through, like, and also
Right.
it's just so it felt so unconstructive, and just as a but also I understand where it's coming from, because it's coming from a place of tribalism. It's coming from a place of that, and also it's the fear of, like, well, if it because if it is possible to get out of this, and you're seeing evidence of that happening, then that either means that I'm not doing the work to get out of this, or I have a version of it that's incurable. And and as frightening as that second option is, there is a sense of community in it, and there's a sense of there's a kind of I don't want to say there's a romance in it, but there is a sense of, like, consistency in it,
Mm.
because I can get support from from my tribe. And if a person leaves the tribe, then we say, oh, well, sure, they were never part of the tribe anyway, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think another aspect of it too is it's a protective thing. And I not with this specifically, but I've done this in the past with other things where if you feel like people read recovery stories and take it one of two ways. They either say, "Oh, that's awesome. That's great. You give me hope. Good for you." Or they say, like you said, you probably never had it that bad in the first place because that person feels like maybe they're not doing something they should be doing. I feel like there's like a sense of guilt attached to it. And that guilt turns into kind of lashing out sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. And this is something I always, I, I always try to be aware of when we're talking about forums and things like that, is that all of this is coming from ultimately a place of pain and wanting to reconnect, and also, I may be quite critical of some of some of the forums, but I use them, and I made also I got some great information on the forums, and I connected with people who became really good friends, and we helped each other. There's huge benefits to be had from the forums. I mean, my God, the even just the realization that, like, okay, I'm not alone. And not only am I not alone, there's a community of people here who are who are gonna answer my questions. Who but I have this very specific visual symptom, and then someone in Minnesota says, "I've got that too," and you're like, "Holy shit! Oh my God, yes!" Like, thank God. I thought I was going crazy. Well, I thought I was going crazy. That's beautiful. That's a wonderful thing to have. But again, as any anxiety qualified anxiety specialist will say to you, that's great. But there comes a point where you have to stop scratching the itch, because you can keep asking those questions forever. You can keep finding variations of symptoms and saying, and this is another thing I did, was even when I was recovering, when I was really starting to see results, I have like a specific visual symptom. And on the same day, I'd have some specific existential thought or memory symptom. And I would put those symptoms together, and I go, like, I don't think I've had these three of these before. I better just check. Just in case this isn't actually DPDR 2.0. So I'd go back on the forum and I'd ask the question, and I would invariably get a response, and someone would say, don't worry about that, that's okay. Or someone would say, I haven't heard that before. And I would freak me out.
Right.
But either way, I was asking the question again, and I was getting back into a discussion. I was taking time out of my day to put my focus on anxiety and DPDR at a time when I needed to be forgetting about it. And the forums are always there to provide you with that if you want it, but you have to kind of unstick yourself from it. Um, it's like if you wanted to quit smoking and you spent your day in a smokers forum. I mean, okay, you're not actively smoking, sir, but you're thinking about it. you're filling your mental garden is being filled with these specific thoughts that you don't need anymore. Um,
Yeah.
it's something that people have kind of talked to me about a few times recently as well. Ryan, is like people would say, but what was it like for people who got this like back in the '60s or '70s? I think we might have talked about this actually, or for people
Yeah, we did.
who would have got this like before the internet. They would have just been searching their whole lives for answers, and that's true. But also, if someone doesn't have access to the internet, and they just have to get back to doing their job or going about their lives in the 1950s or 60s or whatever, that could actually be a really positive thing, because it wrenches the spotlight of your focus away from being able to discuss this all day and onto, well, but I just have to get back to doing my job selling insurance. I got a family to provide for, and then it's gone because there was no space for it to be there. So it swings and roundabouts. I do think it's ultimately a very, very positive thing, though, that that people can find answers to it quickly, and typing your symptoms into Google and finding that's miraculous. I would have killed for that back in the day.
Same.
But yeah, yeah. But again, it's using these tools up until the point where they are not useful anymore, and then consciously stepping back from them to give yourself the space to recover. So Ryan, when you then started to get really when you really start to see results again, what did it feel like? So I know this is a question you've seen a lot in the other interviews, but people often ask me this all the time. What does it actually feel like? Because when you're in it, you can't imagine it. You can't imagine what getting back to normal feels like. You describe the consistency of doing the work of getting back into your car and going out to the shops and stuff. But what does it feel like? Is it a slow process? Is it happening in the background? What does it actually feel like for you?
Yeah, I would say I'm still in the process of it, but like, man, and every person says this because when you watch the recovery videos, they're like, it just feels like it goes back to normal. And like I was thinking there's no way. It does, man. It does just kind of feel like things go back. And all the let me make a caveat to that though. There's one difference. So in your worst and lowest moments, because like you said, I got through this pretty rapidly. I remember that stuff very vividly, very viscerally. And in my worst moments, I was begging God, please give me anything else to worry about. And there have been times now in the last week or two where I look at something like a work deadline. I'm like, I got to make X amount of calls or whatever. And it stresses me out a little bit. But then I stop and think to myself and I kind of chuckle. I'm like, I would have given every dollar I ever earned to have this stress 2 months ago. And I am so grateful that I have it again now. So it feels normal, but with a lot more gratitude attached to it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's a thing people will describe as well often as uh when you're going through it and seeing people just working jobs, some working an office job, and feeling intensely jealous of them. And I felt this too.
Yes.
'Cause I was like, I would love to just be worried about paying my rent, like, instead of thinking about literally the size of the universe, or like, is my consciousness going to erode so much that I will literally disappear off the face of the earth? Like, I'd love to be worried about, like, you know, getting to the shop on time to pick up bread. That sounds amazing. Like,
Yeah.
come on. Yeah, yeah. But it does. But as you said, Ryan, it is ultimately getting back to normal. And it's something a way I like to describe it is when people go through a panic attack for that 10 minutes of a panic attack, you are certain that you are going to die, that you are going crazy, that you will never be the same again. This is it. This is it. You're done. And then the panic attack passes, and then 10, 15 minutes after that, you just get back to doing your shopping or watching the movie or whatever. And you might be a bit shaken. It's not a pleasant experience. But it's the idea is that, like, when you're in that panic attack, it's impossible to imagine not being in the panic attack. You think, but I'm dying. I'm going to die. And then half an hour later, you're just, things are back to normal. And it's the same with this. You know, the certainty that you have that this is going to be forever, or that you've damaged yourself, I can't imagine what getting back to normal is like. You don't have to. That's narrative scaffolding. Even that's overcomplicating it. As your anxiety
Yeah,
reduces, all the symptoms of anxiety fade away with it, and you just get back to kind of living your life as normal. It just floats back into place, and you're just worried about paying the rent again, and it's great.
it is. Yeah, when you're sick with the flu, the last thing on your mind, you couldn't imagine running running a race, or running up a flight of stairs or whatever. Your lungs are still full of this junk. But as you get better from the flu or from whatever respiratory thing you have, those things get easier. And this is exactly like that. It is literally like a mental illness, but in the more like literal sense.
Mm, yeah. I think it's something we spoke about on our call as well, Ryan, was um, using ChatGPT.
Oh, oh, yeah. You want to talk about that really quick?
Oh, yes. Yeah. What was that like for you?
Don't, don't do that. I'm gonna write another post on Reddit. Don't use ChatGPT. It is. Would have been done with this. I may not have needed to reach out to you, Sean, had I not used ChatGPT. That's how much worse it made it. It was, and I won't get into the details, but ChatGPT just recently changed it to put more, I guess, guardrails up to stop this exact thing from happening. But ChatGPT will tell you exactly what you want to hear, and it'll tell it to you in your own language, which makes it so incredibly dangerous when you're viewing life through the eyes of an anxiety filter, because everything you tell it, it wants you to keep engaging with it, and it will feed once it's figured out your pattern. It is reassurance. Once it's figured that out, it'll say things to keep you hooked into it, and it'll be very subtle. There'll be little things that it'll do, and I swear to God, it does it on purpose. But it'll, for instance, if you ask it, tell me about the mammalian dive reflex to stop a panic attack. You know, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard this, but if you submerge your face in ice water during a panic attack, it'll slow down your heart rate. You'll be able to get a grip on yourself. There's some truth to that. Uh, doing anything to interrupt that pattern will kind of snap you back into reality. You can get a grip on yourself a little bit quicker. Great. The problem is it got into hyper specifics and it started making things up. ChatGPT can hallucinate. It will make up information and portray it as real. And so it'll tell you things like, if you hold your breath and then do I forget what it's called, but there's a technique in doesn't matter. It'll add things to the equation, and it'll tell you like it's coming from a place of authority, and it will cite references. Only when you call its bluff and ask for those reference links do you realize that they go nowhere. They're broken links. They reference something completely different. It lies, and it'll keep you spinning so much more so than Reddit ever could. It's the worst thing in the world for an anxious person.
Because of the nature of it, it can't. It can't give, especially when it comes to terms with regard to mental health and health in general. I think it can't give. It doesn't give 100% specific answers. Um,
Right.
just so it has an out, which I understand. Look, it's but so, for example, if you're struggling with anxiety and panic attacks, and you think that you're going crazy, so people with TPDR regularly think, I'm having a psychotic break. That's the first. I don't feel real. I'm having all these horrendous thoughts about consciousness and reality. I must be having a psychotic break. Okay, I thought that. I think most people with TPDR think something like that at some point. So if you go into your doctor and you describe what you're going through, the doctor is going to say to you, you're not having a psychotic break. Okay.
Right.
You're just not. Okay. That isn't this. There's very clear symptoms associated with psychosis and schizophrenia. You're not displaying them. Okay. So it's something else, and we'll get to that, but you rule that out, right? Which is a very reassuring thing to hear. Okay.
Yeah.
If you ask ChatGPT that, ChatGPT cannot say to you, you don't, this isn't psychosis. It can't give you 100. It'll say, okay, this is extremely likely to not be that, but I can't. But like, we're 99.99% sure, right? But if you're going through anxiety, like 99.99, that's not enough. Like,
Nope.
because because you catch that 0.001 and you go like, oh, that's it. And because that conversation can go on indefinitely, it does. And people, I mean, man, if I had access to ChatGPT back in 2005 when I developed this, I would have I would have worn it down to a nub. Like, right? I would never, I would never have stopped. Like, the ability to ask questions, to get questions and get answers in real time. But again, you're not getting that human connection of just the wisdom of a doctor saying, like, look, I've seen people with anxiety conditions before. That's what you have. This isn't, of course, this isn't schizophrenia. Like, of course it isn't. But ChatGPT can't give you that. It can almost give it to you, but it can't give it to you. And with anxiety, because anxiety is based on catastrophic thinking, it just points at that 0.001% and goes like, "Oh, what if that's it?" Like, so that can be that can become a big problem with it as well.
Yeah, and a doctor will tell you flat out. Well, what if the doctor's going to tell you no? It's definitely not this. If you ask ChatGPT, it'll say it'll entertain the request, and well, if it was this, I'm not saying it is, but if it was this, these are the symptoms you might have. That does sound a little like your thing, but I can't say if it is, and it will do that to you. It sort of honey dicks you into this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, these tools that we have that are helpful in many ways, but you have to be aware of the limitations. You have to be aware of when to pull back from it as well. Like, now that you're really making progress with your recovery, Ryan, what's your day-to-day life like?
Boring. It's I wake up, I work out every other day. I'm trying to work out more, but right now it's every other day. My body's just not used to it yet. But I'll work out for 30 minutes to an hour, eat breakfast, shower, do my calls for work. Uh Play Tetris. I started playing Tetris religiously. You told me Mario Kart. I said Tetris. Tetris is what worked. So and then I'll do that throughout the day. Talk to my friends. I'm on a Discord group for a completely separate, entirely different thing. Nothing to do with mental health. I go in there, talk to my people, live in that world for a few hours a day, and then take a shower and do it all again. And it's awesome. It's so much better.
That's so good to hear. Yeah, Tetris is amazing. Um,
The banger.
yeah, it's a banger. I remember reading this thing years ago about uh soldiers who had been through traumatic experiences, and one of the ways that they are treated is that they are given Tetris as quickly as possible after the event, because and this may have only been a very small scale experiment, and I don't expect it was kind of widely adopted, but I could be wrong. But one of the reasons they do it is because when you are focused intensely on playing a game like Tetris, which it just vacuums up your attention, and there's
Yeah.
physicality involved to it too, it prevents the memories of the trauma from forming as solidly as they would have otherwise done. So it just gives your brain space to process these things in the background, as opposed to replaying them over and over and over and over and strengthening them in your consciousness in that way, in your focus. Um, these the as I'm sure I said on the call, on our Zoom session, Ryan, the currency of our consciousness is focus, and we do tend to kind of like massively overcomplicate like how our brains function. But our brains determine whether a thought or a feeling is important or not based on the degree to which we focus on it. And that's it. So if you've seen something traumatic, but then you pick up Tetris and start playing it, even that your brain says, "Oh, that was really awful, but we're playing Tetris now." Right? And that's kind of what a lot of the the, the core cognitive behavior therapy techniques behind anxiety recovery are, is that, like, okay, so I'm having a thought about like being stuck in a different reality for the rest of existence, like this petrifying thought. And then someone tells you, but just swipe your phone open and play Tetris. And you're like, get out of here. Like, don't insult my intelligence by saying that's one of the techniques that I could use. But it works. And it works. Yeah, because that thought that says, well, what if I'm stuck in this alternate reality? It's just words. It's just words. It's not based on data. It's not, it's just words. And when you focus on those words, it's almost like charging a phone. It builds up the power of those words. And when you simply take your attention and focus away from it, as childishly simplistic as this sounds, and I was like, getting out of here when I came across this stuff. It works. You're unplugging those words and you're plugging in Tetris, and you're just saying to your brain, no, we're doing this instead. Um, and it's such a beautiful way of kind of like bypassing all of the complications that come with these thoughts, because when we focus on those thoughts, then we start getting into, oh, but I'm getting into like philosophy here, and have I messed with forces I can't possibly No, I'm playing Tetris. I'm playing Tetris now, But this is what it is for most people because 75% of people will experience DPDR at some point in their lives, because most people will have a panic attack, a traumatic situation, experience violence, whatever. But for most of those 75% of people, it fades away after a couple of minutes or a couple of hours or a day or two at most. And the reason that happens is not because their experience of it is different. It's because they don't focus on it. They don't focus on it and go like, why do I feel like this? Why do I feel disconnected from the world? Oh, Jesus, am I going crazy? Oh my God, this is psychosis. This is psychosis, isn't it? I'm having a psychotic break. No, they have to get up, get the kids out of bed, make the kids lunch, drop the kids to the bus, come back, take the dog for a walk, go to the doctor. Their lives are so busy that this just happens in the background and they focus away from it. So it's almost doing the Tetris technique just through the process of just living your life. You're too busy to do it. And then for me, like when it happened to me and I put my life on hold, stopped working, moved home, and just obsessed about it, it was the incorrect thing to do. And being on the forums. Yeah. Tetris. It's great.
I love it.
So how was the DP manual helpful in your recovery?
It was the basis for everything I did moving forward. So when I read the DP manual, again, a lot of this information, if you're at the point where you're getting the DP manual, you've probably seen a lot of the information outlined in it. The way you hyper concentrated it and sort of boiled down just the very core components and gave me like an actionable plan to kind of use it, even down to the supplements. If you were the St. John's wort, all that stuff, there were things in there that you had found that I had never found that made a more complete picture. And like I said, it kind of gives you a roadmap with how to move through things. So critical, like 70% of the recovery, I would say, started right there.
That's so good to hear, man. I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah.
And we had a Zoom coaching session about 6 weeks ago. Did you find that helpful?
That was the other 29.95%. I did the 0.5% on my own, but no, but it was,
more than that.
Yeah, maybe a little, but it was just a nice addendum, I guess, on the DP manual, because obviously you wrote it, but to be able to hear you verbalize the things I had read and then to specify them and kind of tweak them to my situation was invaluable. I don't know if I would be talking to you right now had I not talked to you then first. I think it would have taken me longer.
That's so good to hear, Brian. I'm thrilled that it was so helpful and that you've made such progress since we've spoken. It's really really great to see. So last question I have for you, Ryan, um, is that there's going to be people watching this who may be going through something very very similar to what you've been through. Maybe people who've had intermittent DPDR over years, um, similar circumstances in terms of triggers, etc., etc. So I know that you've written an extensive Substack and Reddit post with your advice for people with DPDR. But speaking to those people directly now, what advice would you have for anybody with DPDR?
If you take the word disorder and look at what it is, it just means out of order. What you have right now is not an illness. If you want to call it a disorder, that's fine. But just think of it as a fear response happening before the appropriate time, and that'll go a long way. You don't let this be bigger than what it actually is. And as crazy as it sounds, try and invite it in a little bit. Ask it to do the worst it can possibly do. If you want to, okay, I'm going to go crazy, then make me as crazy as you possibly can. If you're going to kill me really good, burn the boats. um, it's a perception thing. Like once you change your mentality about it and start challenging it and pushing back against it and saying, well, I'm going to go do this thing anyways. You kind of have that F it mentality, screw this. I'm going to do this anyways. You're going to panic. Like you're going to panic for sure. You're going to freak out. You're going to be anxious. It's going to be really hard. And then the next time it'll be a little easier and a little easier. But that is literally the way out. That's what you do. You just let it be there. Let it exist. And the day will come when you will also be laughing about Tetris and hating your job like a normal person again. Those days will come back. Just do the thing. Start today. You can start today.
That's excellent advice. Ryan, so your band was called The Channeling. You guys were featured on the Tony Hawk soundtrack, right?
It was a long time ago. Yeah, but yeah, I play bass for The Channeling. Mm-hmm.
That's really really cool. Are you still playing?
I have my own band now, so I am in I got a music project. It's right now it's only me doing it, but it's called Sepherin, and it's similar stuff. It's hard rock, kind of spooky, existential themes. I wrote an entire album about depersonalization, 10 years ago. So yeah.
Great stuff. Well, listen, we'll put any links to those SoundCloud and Spotify, etc., into the video description. I'm also going to put in a link to Ryan's Substack article that we've referenced in it because it's really, really, really interesting. Brian, I've enjoyed speaking to you so much. This has been really, really enjoyable. Thank you for taking the time to share your story. I know there's going to be a lot of people watching this who will find your recovery story inspirational and your words very, very helpful and constructive. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you for writing that article. It really struck a chord with me when I read it as well. I wish I'd come across it back in the day. And it was just a pleasure speaking with you, man. Thank you so much.
I cannot emphasize how honestly I mean this when I say the pleasure has been mine, Sean. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Take care, man. All the best.